So we'll start off. Samuel Farmer, you're a local musician, filmmaker, director, artist, talents of all sorts. I met you back in the day, starting in some bands, Man Size Rat, Skraelings. Well, so now you've got Neon Bombshell.
That's right.
Yeah,
Neon Bombshell.
awesome.
Whenever the quarantine lifts, and we won't talk about that now. That's wishful thinking. Maybe we'll play a show again eventually.
Have you thought of doing any sort of in-house shows for streaming or anything like some bands are doing?
Oh, totally. We our drummer's trying to get set up right now. So because even if we weren't going to do a show, if we want to collaborate on anything, we'd have to do it online. So
Gotcha. Sure.
he's 40 minutes away from, so it's not realistic to drive back and forth and risk anything. So we're working on it. We'll figure it out.
Gotcha. And you've also worked with a bunch of other bands in town and abroad, and contributed to a lot of things. And you also, uh, on top of that, do a lot of film work. And I guess let's start with what first got you into film, so we can lead up to talking about the new DVD.
How far back do you want to go?
Well, how did it start? Like, what was your first? I guess how'd you first get into it? Was it
My
doing music
first,
videos, or was it actually doing short films? Or
um, I think, well, I mean, if you go back to like my first interest in picking up a video camera, my friend Tom randomly one day, he had a project to do for high school and he needed someone to run a camera. And it was nothing. I mean, I just sat there and pressed record because he couldn't do it himself. And this was in the dark days of the 90s when everything was linear editing and, you had to edit in camera. So I went over to his house and he and his buddy Airplane, that's his name, uh, were doing this report on the Mohawk tribe of Native Americans, and they did it in the style of like beat poetry. So there's a bass player standing in the background, and he's giving his report in the form of poetry. It was hilarious. I don't know why, but like that one experience was like, wait, you can turn in a history report as a video. And so I exploited that every chance I got throughout school. Anytime there was a report, I would ask, can I make a video? Professionally, I didn't actually get any real industry work until I got hired on at a local television station, WJCT. And I had to work my way up from a camera operator and a crew person, where you get stuck doing stuff like building sets and being a liaison for clients that use the studio space. So you're, running a light board for, at the time, Kirby Hamilton in town was doing a lot of commercials. So, I'd be the guy representing the facility whenever the client was in there shooting a commercial. So I'd be changing out breakers and turning on lights, things like that for them. And then just gradually got involved with the union, did some stagehand work, blah, 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 freelanced, worked for some websites. And then eventually WJCT hired me on as a producer, content producer. And filmmaking was just, short films, things in the background like that, up until we met Camille. So I guess that brings us to this.
well, you did some stuff briefly with Mark Patton.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um,
Doing There Is No Jesse. Um, so that ties into I know you're a big horror fan, obviously, with the shirt.
yeah,
That ties into the Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
yeah. So I met Mark. He was at I mean, you know what it's like trying to put on a convention around these parts. He was at one of the conventions. I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but it was lightly attended, as they say. And I just had a chance to sit down with him and talk to him. And he was selling a book. I thought it might be an arm's length of me right now, called Jesse's Lost Journals, which was his attempt to expand on the character of Jesse Walsh. It's a pretty neat read for anybody who's into, expanding the world of Nightmare on Elm Street. And there's a kind of clever twist that happens about 2/3 of the way through that journal. I just sat down, talked to him about the film, and we dove deeper rather than the usual. Hey, what's it like to work with Robert Englund? All that we talked about. I don't think it was a mystery at the time. Certainly, more people know about it now. But at the time, there had been a lot of think pieces going around about how the subtext of the film. And so we got a chance. He pulled a chair up, and we just sat down and we talked for probably an hour, hour and a half, and we exchanged information. And he talked about he'd been working on a documentary proposal called "There Is No Jesse," which would have gone into the subtext of Nightmare on Elm Street with Tommy Hudson and some of the people who did the Never Sleep Again documentary.
Right.
But it had stagnated for whatever reason. So Mark and I and my wife Karina, who was producing, put together a pitch for a documentary and put together some teasers. Mark was in the state for a different horror convention, and we shot two teasers that were released where he kind of tells his story into camera in a stylized sort of way. And then we shot the Boiler Room teaser, which was the thrill. We never really released that one. It's online now.
Being a background photographer for that one, I have some.
Right. Yeah. So that was the project was called There Is No Jesse, and we were taking a different approach from what they ultimately did, which was sort of a My Dinner with Andre approach. Like Mark and I were going to have more or less a conversation about this, and we were going to sit down with some of the people who were in Nightmare 2. And there were a few other stylistic choices we were going to make, but we were thinking really small scale. But at one point, we had a disagreement over funding. Really, that's what it came down to. He had asked me to reach out to someone that was promising money and try to negotiate the guy, because the guy wanted a producer role in it. So the idea was, let's try and negotiate him down to more or less a property master, because Mark wanted to make sure that he had absolute control over the final product.
Right.
And I thought that I got that out of him. He had actually at one point promised more money than we'd asked for, and also that he wasn't even going to be hands-on. He was going to remain. I think he's located in Arizona. So I excitedly brought this information to Mark, and I think Mark was just going through a period. He has periods of self-doubt, he'll admit to, where I think he was going through a period where he was doubting whether or not he could tell his story, and just decided that he didn't want to go with this guy. And at that point, we parted ways on fairly agreeable terms. I wished him good luck, and Roman Chiamenti, who ended up directing the film with Tyler Jensen, had been doing sound for us. He had been mixing sound for us already, so it was just natural for him to step in and take over. And they ended up shooting the bulk of their interviews at the Pop Shock convention. Do you remember that? It was in like Tampa.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So real quick, one of the other points of tension was that I was dealing with Mark Heller, who was running that, and Mark was the one that was trying to facilitate. What's that?
He was running the Pop Shock convention.
Yeah.
Is that the one that had John Waters as a headliner?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and dive into that very briefly. So Mark had said, this guy's trying to facilitate this meetup. He's paying us all to come out there, yada yada yada. Give him whatever he needs. At one point, Mark Heller had asked if we could send him a trailer, because they were before the event started, they were screening A Nightmare on Elm Street. There was supposed to be like 200 people there. Wes Craven was in attendance. This is when he was still alive, and they wanted to show the teaser trailer prior to A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Mark would be able to get up on stage and talk a little bit about the project, and maybe shake loose some interest from financiers, or at least start building the audience for it then. So I sent the Boiler Room teaser, which hadn't been released at that point, and I got this really catty email back from Mark Heller telling he was confused. He didn't understand what it was. He was convinced that no one would get it, that it didn't explain what the idea was. I don't know, it just seemed to go overboard, kind of on the criticism of it. And I just kept thinking, dude, it's the people are there to see Nightmare on Elm Street. You don't have to explain to them what the boiler room means, you know. And then this is all supposed to be a setup so Mark can get on stage and use his words in order to explain to the audience what it is that they're trying to do. This is like a sizzle reel before a public speaker comes on stage, you know.
Right.
So I'd kind of told Mark Patton at that point, I was like, I don't trust this guy. There's something weird about him. You know, he's got, you know, and I'm on the spectrum. I never have a sense about people, but I just got this thing, like I've never been treated like this professionally, you know, by someone to just flip out like that. And then sure enough, the headline, of course, is that Shock Pop never paid anybody. Like there was a big scandal, and, you know, John Waters um, did an interview where he said, you know, it doesn't hurt me, I've got money, but a lot of these people that rely on it because
Right.
they're darlings of the circuit and this is their income, it's going to hurt them a lot. And but anyway, so that's a complete side story. We'd stepped away from it, and then they changed the name to Scream Queen, which is it was very clever. Scream apostrophe Queen, or comma. I messed that up. Anyway, so they finished it. I stayed on as an animator. So if you see the final product, I did the opening credit sequence. So the whole thing the concept that they pitched to me was that there would be a visual history of Scream Queens in cinema. So it starts with like Nosferatu, and it goes through Bride of Frankenstein, Preach from the Black Lagoon, into like 70s exploitation, and ultimately ends with Mark. And so it was making a big point to go that we've been through all these women who are traditionally Scream Queens, and then we stop here at this point, and Mark is the first male Scream Queen. So I stuck around for that.
He
And
actually won the award for that, didn't he?
what's that?
He actually won an award for being a Scream Queen, first male Scream Queen, didn't he?
Oh, really? Okay.
He actually won an award.
You know, and then we saw him again. We saw him when he came to town to do Nightmare on Elm Street, and we caught up and talked about. He had told us how difficult it had been, and kind of recapped his year working on it. And so we're all on good terms and everything like that. And I'm actually glad that Roman and Tyler did it, because I think it was a smart idea to expand the conversation beyond just A Nightmare on Elm Street and Mark's immediate life, and put it in context in 1985 and the hysteria of the moral majority and the backlash from the horror community and the AIDS epidemic and everything that was going on, just for people who may be younger and discovering the series for the first time and living in a post marriage equality world where there are still problems, but it's not near the hysteria that it might have been in 1985. Because Mark was very adamant that whatever progress you think we've made can just be wiped out like that, you know. So he wanted to remind people what the world looked like not that long ago. So I think it was smart the way that they handled it, and I'm actually glad that it ended up in their hands and that we didn't do what we had originally proposed. So I'm glad to see they've been very successful with it so far.
Yeah, it seemed like a long and rocky road, but it is great that it came to fruition and what it did. It seemed like it worked out for everyone.
Yeah,
Good.
totally.
That led then. So how did you end up starting for the Cry for the Badman, going down that road? What was the initial concept of it? You know, how did it sort of formulate for you?
Well, it started before There Is No Jesse / Scream Queen. Camille and I have a mutual friend in Jerry Rosenberg. And Jerry had just said randomly one day, "Hey, you make scary short films. I know someone who acts in scary films." I had no idea at the time he was talking about Camille Keaton. And it was really just kind of a social networking kind of thing, you know, like, hey, here's my friend, meet my other friend, work together, you know, go do the thing. There's really no direction to it. And Karina and I met Camille, I think it was like 11:30 at night the day after Christmas. She was coming through town because she was staying overnight at Jerry's on her way up to Georgia where she has family. And it was just a last minute. Jerry's like, "Can you come over now?" So we're like, we'll get dressed to come over. And we had to have a pitch for her, you know, because obviously at that point, we had done a film, which I don't talk about very often because I'd taken over directing duties from someone else. It was supposed to be someone else's film. And so we didn't really have anything to demonstrate, like, hey, we're capable of doing what we say. It was just kind of Jerry's word. Um, and we came up with we thought, it'd be smart to do something with someone who has a name, obviously. It tends to be the thing that helps filmmakers who haven't established themselves find an audience. You and I are talking, but most of the time people really just want to hear from Camille. Obviously, she's the scream queen, she's the legend. And so having her on board means it's easier to find money, it's easier to find distribution, it's easier to find press. It ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah. And we went through that phase of like, well, what can we put her in? I think at the time she was about 65 years old, and you're just racking your brain going, all my friends are in their 30s. I don't know. Just see the mom in something. And it just seems so stupid. Like, everybody does that. They don't utilize her, in a proper lead role, or take themselves outside of their comfort zone and write something for someone older. And so we just started thinking siege, Western, high noon. It just seemed to make sense. We knew we'd have limited resources and a small budget, so it needed to be something that could happen almost in real time in terms of plot, with few locations and few actors. Sorry, should have turned my ringer off before I started this. And the siege thing made sense at the time. The home invasion movie was sort of the flavor of the month, and so we didn't want to completely repeat that. So we tried to dress it up in the old Western formula. Like High Noon is the one we reference the most, but there's a lot of those siege movies, the Last Stand kind of movie. And we took Camille's character and we thought, it works for Clint Eastwood so well. As he gets older, he seems more dangerous. It's this weird thing that you'd think would be backwards. Like, people get older and they get more frail, but when you see Clint Eastwood on screen, he just seems like he's got less and less patience to deal with people's shit, right? Like, he might have been more into a negotiation or something like that in his 30s, but when he's in his mid 80s now, I guess, he's more like, I don't have time for this. I'm just going to grab my shotgun and let the cops sort it out later. And so we thought that could be the inspiration for like something Camille could do in her 70s, is have this sort of, I'm too old for this shit. I don't have time to sort this out. And that's the story that we pitched to her, was basically, it's just going to be this sort of cat and mouse siege film. Don't let the story get in the way of the plot. It's very straightforward. But that was 2013. So it had been sitting around, and we originally thought we had a producing partner who had put out a few movies at the time. There was a remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Oh yeah.
Called The Barons. And their representative was local, and he was pitching our film to them, and it seemed like everything was greenlit. To the point where we had cast the film. A lot of the people that are into film now were cast 7 years ago. We were told to start pre-production. We started putting together a schedule and everything. And then just at some point, people stopped returning my emails, because I got to the point where I was like, I need to start renting things or making reservations to rent camera and grip gear and things like that. And that's when the emails dried up. And so I kind of had to send everybody home and say, don't cancel any gigs because of us. And then we stuck with Mark for 2 years. And then after that, we did a proof of concept teaser. And then that's when I finally took the idea to Catherine McAvoy. And I had John Shepard on board as a producer at that point. And he had done, he's done a lot of films, but he had done a short film that a lot of horror fans might know called Velvet Road, which was a very well-received zombie short film that came out around the same time The Walking Dead started. So it got passed around, and it was shown on FearNet for a while before that, I think, got absorbed into Shudder. And he was able to make the case, like, Sam can make the movie, he can produce the movie, but I've got experience in distributing stuff. And so it helped us secure the money for it. So we were finally off the ground fall of 2017 after a few false starts.
And then, so how long did it take you to then formulate the story, write the script, and get everything ready to go? And
We had a script from 2013. We just reworked it a little bit whenever the 2017 version of it came around. The original plot was a little bit more complicated, and it was definitely longer. There were four people trying to break into the house instead of just three. But we took attributes from one of the characters and just kind of merged them. It seemed extraneous, and also it was cost prohibitive to hire another actor. And we just simplified it. You know, it was the original story involved a settlement with the boys and a sports program and small town hostilities and things like that. And it was the scope was really big, and we realized that this is really just about a piece of property. There's somebody trying to make this land grab by force, and someone who doesn't want to take it. So the revisions probably took 2 or 3 days. It was so quick because one of the things that helped out was when we wrote the first script, we hadn't worked with Camille. We just met her and just gauged her interests. What are you into? She said straw dogs. And I said, okay, I can work with that. When we got the money, I had done the proof of concept trailer with her. So I'd actually worked with her once. And then I'd also been on set when she was doing another short film here in town called Me and Mrs. Jones. So I'd seen how she worked, and I'd gotten to know a little bit more about her personally because we had stayed in contact over the course of those 4 or 5 years. And so I went back through the script, and it was a breeze to sort of tailor the character to her strengths and her personality. And there are a lot of parallels between her life and the fictional character that she plays that we borrowed from. So some of it isn't acting; it's just recalling stuff. Like she had an incident where she had a fan. I think a lot of people who are in horror movies eventually encounter the obsessive fan who doesn't understand boundaries. So there is that side of Camille that's had to deal with the cops, and the cops not believing her or not taking it seriously, and having to armor herself and things like that. So some of that stuff made it in the script, and it just happened quickly because we had real life to pull from.
gotcha. And any let's see what was some of the, is there any on the set stories you can tell us? Any sort of like crazy like on the set
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. My
weirdest thing
favorite
that happened
story,
on?
I don't know how crazy they get, but we definitely had there were some funny moments on set.
Okay. Well then, okay. What was the funniest moment that happened on set during the filming for you?
Okay. We there's a moment in the film where a head explodes, and anytime you do a special effect, physical horror fans love physical effects, so you have to deliver at least a couple of gory moments. And there was a headshot that we had scripted, and the original idea was that the gun was going up to the back of the head, and the blast was going to come out towards the camera. We were so low budget that our insurance policy only covered like pneumatic effects. So anything pressure based or mechanically based, we didn't have money in the budget for any pyro. That included squibs. So everything was done with a pressurized air tank to force blood through tubes. So the head was made, and the fake head was made, and the inside of the head was scored right about here where the blood was supposed to come through. And myself and the camera operator that day was a guy named Nick. We were on location, which is real location. We have money to set dress or build a set or anything like that. So out of respect for the home, we had put plastic wrapping up everywhere, every inch that wasn't in frame. The whole place was the ceiling, the floor. There was a furniture behind it. It was just, and then we were behind like a splash guard basically. So Nick and I are looking at the prop head, and Jay, the special effects guy, is going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then boom, it's supposed to come out. Off to the side is the entire, like everybody who was scheduled that day, the entire cast and crew, plus whoever happened to be hanging out on set that day. They're all off to the side. So we roll, which we're over cranked, so it'll play back in slow motion. 3, 2, 1, we hear the burst of air, and we see the head kind of jump like that. But to myself and Nick, we didn't see anything. We didn't see any blood. It certainly didn't explode. But everybody on that side just lost their minds. Like they were cheering, and they like, oh wow, oh my God, and all that. And it turns out if I could move my head, this is about how the shot was framed. All of the gore went out of the top of the head. We don't know how. The hose was pointed this way. This was the breaking point, but everything went up and out. So Nick and I didn't see anything. When we pulled the sheets back to look, all of the brains were on the ceiling. So we had to pull everything down, clean up,
Oh,
reset. Second time, it came out like right here and went up again.
hmm.
At that point, you've wasted like 3-4 hours on a practical effect, and you've got to move on. We had to report time to SAG, so we couldn't have the actors on set for more than 8 hours, or we'd be paying time and a half. And so we let it be. Then when the film ended and nobody was on set anymore, I put it into an assembly cut, thinking that one will work. I'll make it work. I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can supplement it with some digital effects. Just wasn't working. So I told Jay, the special effects guy, that we were going to go out to Catherine's property, which is out in Fruit Cove in the middle of nowhere. And we were just going to shoot the head. We weren't on set anymore. We didn't have insurance concerns anymore. So we went out into a field. We stuck the head on a stick. We set up a false wall, recreated the lighting. Pat overcranked the camera, like 240 frames a second. We all walked back, and Jay shot the head with a 12 gauge shotgun. So what you see on camera is just what happens when it's not a special effect. He's just blowing a head apart. Yeah.
Nice.
And that worked.
Right on. And so now, for all your hard work, it's hit DVD. How does that process work?
We had been hit up pretty early on. See, this is the bonus of, I guess, having the a bankable talent in it. Is that we started getting unsolicited offers from distributors before the film was even done. Once there was an IMDb listing, we started getting
Hmm.
messages on our website's inbox from different distributors. And so John sort of took over at that part. He had the most experience with it to vet each one of them, because a lot of times some of these distributors will just order in bulk and try to flood the shelves, make sure every Walmart has a copy of it. And with low budget films that have small marketing budgets, it's really difficult to make the money back. You end up going further in the hole to make all of those physical copies. And we found a distributor that worked basically on a smaller order and then a demand sort of basis, and there are different tiers for it. And that was Uncorked. And John thought their approach was really smart. And well, I'm sorry, that was the distributor in the U.S. The sales agent was with Cut Entertainment. That was the model. And so we felt like this guy will rep us at AFM, American Film Market. Happens every October in Los Angeles. There's a bunch of distributors looking to buy up films. He found us a Japanese deal there. It's the biggest. We made about half of our budget back on that deal alone. So that was big for us. If you can get a minimum guarantee, it gets you that much closer to making money. And if you make money, then you can turn around and make another movie.
Right.
And that's like the ultimate goal. Like we know we're not going to get rich off of it, but we'd sure like to make another film at some point. But that was the process. Just we got a few messages, and John just made some phone calls, and basing his experiences with previous distributors, was able to say this is the smartest thing for a film this size with this talent and this niche, basically. And we've gotten U.S. and Canada, which is what's out right now. There's actually a theatrical release in Japan, which means Japan has a 5.1 surround sound mix that the States didn't get. And then Germany has it. We're working to release it on television, I think, over there. And then Scandinavia, Belgium, Luxembourg, and maybe Norway. I can't remember. There's a few other European countries that are going to, I think, show it on television. So, but it's got different names. That's the weird thing about it. It's Cry for the Bad Man here in the States, but Germany decided they wanted to reference I Spit on Your Grave somehow, and we thought that was not really smart because people would go into it with an expectation that it was a sequel or something like that, and then be
Still having
disappointed.
been.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we suggested, look, if you're gonna make a reference to it, just call it Night of the Woman. Is the original title for I Spit was Day of the Woman, and this takes place at night. And so that way you could say there's an homage there in the title, but it's not. You're not trying to pull one over on the audience and say that it's a direct sequel.
Right.
So that's what they ended up calling it. And that was just a random suggestion. They liked it, so they went with it. I think Japan is calling the film Miss Punisher, which is an interesting choice. So yeah,
that's kind of fantastic.
and we're still looking for other territories right now, but that's what we've gotten so far.
But it's also available on pretty much all platforms to order, Amazon Prime and.
Yeah, Amazon, Google, iTunes. I was like, iTunes, Apple TV now. I forgot what happened with that. Yeah, Google Play, Vudu, Xbox/Microsoft. The physical copy. We didn't expect physical copies. We were told early on that was cost prohibitive, but they felt confident about it to make a physical copy and put it on Amazon Prime for people who want it. But you can also stream it there if you don't want to kick around physical media.
Right.
And DirecTV, that's the other place. We know that there's also placement on a cable provider, but it's an aggregator, so we don't yet know where that's going to quite land. But I'll make a post about it when we find out. So depending on how well Cry for the Bad Man does, I'll be pitching the UFO. We're calling it the UFO idea right now. The short's called Incident on Eagle Lake, but we don't have an official title for it. But it's kind of silly, dark comedy, and it's an angle that I don't think anybody's done with a UFO film before. I can't give it away, but it, to me, like now that we've thought of it, seems like the most obvious angle for it. So it'll be weird to see how it performs if we actually get to make it. And then the other thing is we shot a short back in November called Fright House 3, which there isn't a Fright House 1 or 2. We shot it with Scott, who plays the bad guy in Cry for the Bad Man, about a little girl who has the ability to conjure things that she draws in a notebook. So it's like, for us, it's different. It's more of like a fantasy horror, kind of like a supernatural, like scary stories to tell in the dark, or Goosebumps, or Are You Afraid of the Dark, kind of like more of a fun, spooky story rather than something like grisly and adult themed. We shot that. There were some most of the special effects are done. I have to complete, I think, 2 more shots and then send it off to be scored and mixed. So hopefully end of summer we'll be able to release that one. So mostly right now, short films, continuing to promote Cry for the Bad Man, and then at some point pitching this other feature maybe to get made if we're ever able to go back to normal. That's the big question mark.
Yeah. Get one of those Mandalorian sets where it's just a couple of people and you get the whole.
Yeah, it's going to have to be something like that. Like everybody's
no more sets
emailing their performances.
So where? Let me get before I let you go. Tell me where we can find your stuff online, where you post your short videos or your videos or any updates on Cry for the Bad Man. Where's the best place for people to go online to find you?
Yeah, the easiest place, the thing that everything kind of gets bottlenecked through, is Facebook for now. Even though Facebook narrows your reach considerably, we just don't have a proper home for any of this stuff because we're terribly unorganized about it. That's why we have a distributor, because we're terrible at distributing our own work. But facebook.com/Chance in Hell Productions, and we're on Instagram, and there's a channel on YouTube where we have other shorts that we've done, and like talked about, There Is No Jesse, the Boiler Room is on that channel, and it's just anytime we do something on a whim, we end up parking it there.
Great. Well, we'll link that at the end of the video then.
Awesome.
All right. Appreciate it.